everybody, and welcome. I am Medieval America, and I'm starting a new video series where I will cover the basics, setup, and strategy of Medieval 2 multiplayer. This video is mainly for beginners, but I'm sure that anyone can learn from it no matter how experienced. Let me just say that I do not know everything there is to know about Medieval 2 or multiplayer, so please forgive me if I don't say everything. And also, if you have something you want to add that's a tip or a trick, please feel free to add it in the comments. I'm happy to learn new information, and I'm sure my viewers would as well.
To simply join a multiplayer game, you just go up and you click multiplayer. Then you go to online battles. Then you can either join a game by clicking on another game and hitting join, or you can host your own game by clicking host game. When you choose to host a game, you first have to do a game setup. You can do quick start or scenario, but we're going to go over custom battle. I don't like quick start because that gives you random armies, but I do like scenarios. Scenarios is pretty darn cool. They can be fun, but actually they can be boring as well because as you can see, you can't really set up your battle. You just get to pick, you have to pick a team and see where it goes. So let's go with the custom battle. First you have to pick a game name, something simple so people understand what your game's about. Max players you don't need to pick at all, but you can if you want to. That's just how many people are allowed in your group. A password's not necessary, especially if you want to play with other people. If you want to play with friends, you can use a password, but you don't have to. Unit scale, never choose small. Huge, I would only use huge if it's a 1v1 or if your computer has very, very, very good handling capabilities, but most computers don't, especially the people you're playing. So I would stick to normal and large. If it's a 2v2, you can go with normal. If it's a 1v1, go with large. You can do a large and 1v1 as well. So after custom battle, then it's basically just like a normal setup. So then you have a choice.
Choosing a pitched battle where armies meet in field or forest to battle it out, or choosing a siege, where armies will meet and fight on the walls and in the streets of a city or castle. Sieges are much more common and more popular, but battles are also very fun as well.
Now that you've selected a map, and a trick for having something like Grassy Plain have a clear weather at it, all you have to do is go down to one where you can control the weather, like Tuscany, make sure the weather is clear, and then just scroll up and go back to Grassy Plain. Then you have to select whether you want a settlement or not. Then you have to pick a period. The periods I like the best are the high period and all. I like high because it takes away the conquistadors and the heavy infantry and all the other OP units, and I would say gives a kind of a broad spectrum of equality throughout the Western factions. And the all period, typically, you get all the units, so you have a lot to pick from. The early period gives you only the early units, and the units are kind of weaker than normal. And the late period gives you all those OP units. If you're new, I would definitely stick to all, just because then you can get used to using any type of unit in battle. Then you have to pick a time period. That's easy. I would simply go with no time limit unless you're in a siege and you want to force the attackers to attack, but if you're new, I would stick to no time limit. Here is a list of the basic rules that people will put or that you can put within your battle. The first thing you should go over is max cav. Typically, as you can see, an average max cav is 4 or 6. If someone has 4/2, that means that you're allowed 4 like melee cav or shock cavalry, and then 2 missile cav. If someone says no gun, that's simple. That means no gunpowder units are allowed within the battle. The same goes with max or no navitum. If you say no gunpowder, do not assume that the person means no navitum, or do not assume that the other players will know that you mean that. Make sure that you're as specific as possible as to what rules that you want. If someone says no Ellie, that's simple. No elephants. Even if you say no gunpowder, because all elephants are gunpowder units, I don't know why they did that, but they did. No, make sure you state that elephants are not allowed in the battle. A max or no art is just simple. Typically for artillery, that means I would say around a max of 2. I would only put a max 1 if they're fighting like a castle, or if it's like a village or something, or a fort. Something that doesn't need a lot of artillery to bash at it. If someone says max or no art, If you do not want the person using cannons, make sure you state no cannons, because artillery and cannons are kind of the same thing, but they're the same thing, but please state no cannons if you mean no cannons. People will say max archer, but it's not something that's used a lot. A lot of times it's never used, but you can if you want to. Very important. In a siege, you get to pick a level of defense. That's what the towers are going to shoot. Level 1 being arrows, level 2 being ballista, and level 3 being cannons. Only do level 1. The towers give the defenders a huge advantage, and level 2 or 3 can make it, if not much harder, almost impossible for the attackers to succeed in attacking a siege. So if you're doing a siege, please only use level 1 defense. After you have made sure that each player understands the rules that you've laid out, we get to one of the most important things in setting up a battle: choosing money for teams. In a pitch battle, I recommend giving each person anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000 coins. 12,500 and 15,000 are good middle ground. So that means if it's a 2v2, you give the team 20,000 to 40,000, and a 3v3, 40,000 to 60,000, and so on and so on. It splits up the money evenly, so you don't have to worry about one person taking all the money. If you decided to go with the siege, I recommend giving the attackers at least 5,000 to 10,000 more money overall. So if it's a 1v1, you can give the defender 15,000 and the attacker 20,000. In a 2v2, you give the team 30,000 and you give the attacker team 35,000, or you can go 30,000 to 40,000 if you're feeling generous. In a 2v3, it's a little different. You can either give each team equal money, so if you're giving each team 12,500, you give the defending team 25,000 and the attacking team 37,500, or if you're giving each team 15,000, you give them 30,000 and 45,000. One thing you can also do is give equal money, because the defenders will have better units, but the attackers will have 2 for every 3 the defenders have, according to math. There are people that do unlimited money within sieges. However, I would be wary of those games because you can get a lot of Mongols rushing out of the gates, or Timurids, or you get a lot of weird things with those. So I would stick to basic just money rules. Keep in mind that the more money that you give, the better equipped and the larger armies there's going to be. Now that you have explained the rules to each teammate and selected the amount of money that each team is going to get, you get to choose which faction is going to fight for you. For the sake of being brief, there are 3 ways you can pick a faction. The first is for fun. That means picking a faction such as the Papal States, or Poland, or even Denmark. Picking a faction that you maybe want to try out for a first time, or just picking a faction that you think you'll enjoy playing as. The second is for strategy. Basing off of strategy for myself, I would pick a faction like Sicily or Venice. I like those two because they have a very good amount of decent heavy infantry, but they also have the Norman Knights and the Stratiots, which are good cav and they're fast. I'm an aggressive player, so I'm going to pick factions that can allow me to maneuver well as have good infantry that can be aggressive. But if you're more of a defensive player, I recommend picking factions like Portugal or Scotland and possibly even England. Factions that have good pikes, but as well as good heavy infantry and archers that can hold the line and hold sections of a hill that you need. Besides basing it off of who you are as a player, you can base it off the map. If the map is a large map with hills on opposite sides of the map, you can pick a faction like France, because if the rules allow artillery, France has the Serpentine, which is great for killing infantry at long ranges. Hungary also has the Serpentine. So that's what it means by picking it off of strategy. You pick off of, okay, what faction is going to give me the greatest advantage based off the rules, the map, and who I am as a player. And the third is basing it off of what other people pick. Picking factions based off of other people is very important. If someone picks a faction like Milan, they have Genie's Crossbowmen, which are the best in the game. That means you want to pick a faction that has good offensive cavalry. Something like Russia or possibly France. Factions that have great cavalry which will give you an advantage over Milan, who besides Familiae Ducale lack that heavy cavalry. If someone picks Spain, you have to pick either Portugal, the Moors, or Venice. Why? Spain has got conquistadors, which are the best infantry in the game. The only infantry that can go toe-to-toe with conquistadors are the other conquistadors of Portugal, the Christian Guard of the Moors, or the Venetian heavy infantry of Venice. A third example for picking off other people, if someone picks a faction like Scotland, which has good pikes, or even the pikemen of Portugal, you want to pick a faction that is good offensively. So that means picking a faction like England, or France, or possibly even Venice. Picking factions that have decent crossbowmen or archers so you can gun down their pikes from afar, as well as factions that have good infantry, which can go up against the pikes. Because Venice has the Adventure, which have a great attack. England has its retinue longbowmen, which are great at killing people. And Venice, while it has the average Pavese crossbowmen, it does have the Venetian heavy infantry, which are fantastic at killing pikes. So that means basically picking up other people. You want to look at what the faction's strengths are and say, okay, these are factions that go well against their factions. Here's a list created by Pixelated Apollo of his opinions of the top 10 factions within the vanilla Medieval 2 Total War. I think this list is fantastic, and the newer player you are, the more I recommend you start at the top of the list and work your way down. So picking from any one of these factions would be perfectly fine. I will be doing a video later on that goes more into depth about which factions I think you should pick, but for now, we're going to pick a random faction and hit next. Now you get to build your army. I will also do a video on how to build your own army, and I will go very in depth on how I think you should build an army. But for now, we're just going to pick a random faction of cavalry, missile troops, and infantry, just to build a random army. The next tip that I have, and possibly one of my most important, is to spend all of your money. After you've spent your troops, make sure that you upgrade them until your money is gone. Okay? You will be surprised how many people I've met who do not spend all of their money. Believe me when I say that your opponents will be spending the majority of their florins. And you should too, in essence, to try to level the playing field as well as make your army as good as it possibly could be. Now that we've spent all of our money, all we have to do is hit next. Now you get here into the waiting box. You'll wait here for other players to start. All you have to do is wait until all their statuses are green. Then the battle will start. Now you just have to wait for the person to load. And if you're wondering how you can see the prices, I hit T for toggle, which means I can click all players, doesn't matter what you click because no one will see it. Then you go #P, and that allows you to see how much money people spent.
Then you just click Start Deployment, and you can begin your battle.
So I hope this was a good guide on how to set up a multiplayer battle, guys. I will have at least a few more videos coming. One on how to pick a faction, but more in depth. One in depth on how I think is a good way to build your army. And then another one on strategies. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I'm Medieval America, and I hope you guys have a great day, and best of luck in your next battles.